Why is everyone spamming check Twitter? Call of Duty tweeted. Wait, anti-cheat update. Cronus will now be detected. Chat has nothing to do with me. All right, let's check out the game. Let's hop on. Wait. Gotcha, bitch. No. What?
The problem is Call of Duty has a fatigue problem. And this is, we've also mentioned this in another video. It's really gotten to the point where people just do not care about this franchise like they used to do, or like they used to, whether it's because it's the annual releases and they just don't feel as impactful, whether it's, you know, every game release, there seems to be something wrong, whether it's this year with the campaign, last year with the Warzone integration, and then, you know, of course, another one is just players not feeling heard, whether it's people at home, you guys or myself, talking and being like, hey, what about this change or this change? And, you know, when we don't get any changes over the last 5 years, and then change happens when there's actually competition, you kind of lose a little bit of trust, because you think that they are making these changes, at least the way I think, most of you think, because you're not stupid, is, wow, they're only making these changes because they have to. It's not because they want to.
You see, for the last like 6 years, ever since MW 2019 came out, I've coined this term, the dark ages of COD, and a lot of people genuinely thought we were gonna get out of that with Black Ops 7. And I've told everybody, you know, the 122 people that are still playing this game, that no matter your thoughts on it, good or bad, the game is not performing well enough to Activision's standards. And what does that mean? That usually means whatever we're about to get next is probably only going to be made with the hopes of rekindling that amount of money that has been lost from Black Ops 7. And the result is Modern Warfare 2019 Part 4 by Infinity Ward.
Activision finally admitted it. After years of confidence, deflection, and pretending nothing was wrong, the biggest publisher in shooters quietly did something they almost never do. They changed course. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. Black Ops 7 didn't just underperform, it forced Activision into damage control mode, the kind that only happens when internal expectations collapse and denial stops being an option. And that's what makes this moment different. This wasn't another loud controversy that fades after a few weeks. This was the first visible crack in a franchise that built its identity on being unstoppable. And once that crack appeared, everything underneath it started to show. Because Black Ops 7 didn't fail for one reason. It failed because a decade of decisions finally collided with a very different industry.
At the same time, Black Ops 7 will be significantly more enjoyable, yet it is a failure in their eyes. Don't you dare pin it on the people paying money. Somewhere out there, there's a fanboy who will say this is because of people hating on Black Ops 7, as if this nasty concoction that is Modern Warfare 4 hasn't been in development or in talks for 4 years by the time it comes out. We need to realize as a community that when you mix a greedy, careless corporation like Activision that only cares about money with developers who are proven to be stubborn with community feedback, you get games like MW 2019 Part 2 and soon to be Part 4. Keep in mind, by Activision's words, the future of Call of Duty is very strong and we believe our best days are ahead of us given the depth and talent of our development teams. Cap.
For most of its history, Call of Duty operated with absolute certainty. Even bad launches were reframed as successes. Even backlash was dismissed as noise. The assumption was simple. Players would complain, but they'd still buy. That assumption held for years, until Black Ops 7. Instead of the usual victory messaging, Activision went quiet. Then came the admission. The game didn't meet expectations. Sales were softer than planned. Engagement wasn't where it needed to be. And most importantly, they announced a shift away from back-to-back releases within the same series. That announcement alone tells you how serious the situation is. Publishers don't voluntarily slow production on their biggest moneymaker unless the math stops working. They don't talk about rethinking strategy when everything is fine. This wasn't transparency. It was pressure showing through the cracks. Black Ops 7 forced Activision to acknowledge something they'd avoided for years. Call of Duty isn't immune anymore. And once that became clear, people started looking closer at the numbers.
I gotta say, maybe y'all are the ones that are actually right. So this is kind of the uncomfortable truth that I'm wrestling with here, is because I love Call of Duty. As you can tell, I think most of you that are subscribed to this channel know that I love it. I've loved it since I was freaking 12 years old, playing COD 1, COD 2 on the 360. So I want this franchise to succeed. But the problem is Call of Duty has a fatigue problem. And this is, we've also mentioned this in another video. It's really gotten to the point where people just do not care about this franchise like they used to do,
Once analysts began pulling data, the picture sharpened quickly. Player counts fell hard after launch. Physical sales dropped dramatically compared to Black Ops 6. Reports pointed to a decline that wasn't just noticeable, it was historic by franchise standards. A drop of this size doesn't happen because of one bad decision. It happens when momentum disappears. And that's what made this so alarming. Call of Duty didn't just sell less, it lost relevance. Players weren't just skipping Black Ops 7, they were spending their time elsewhere, choosing other shooters, other ecosystems, other games that respected their time differently. While Call of Duty struggled, competitors surged. Battlefield 6 broke franchise records. New shooters carved out space. Even long-standing live service games tightened their grip on attention. The shooter audience didn't disappear, it moved. And for the first time in a long time, Call of Duty wasn't the default destination. That shift terrified executives because dominance is what the franchise was built on. Once you lose that gravitational pull, the entire model starts to wobble. So Activision looked for a clean explanation, something easy to point to, something that didn't require admitting deeper failure.
Getting able to use a Cronus without getting banned. That's just it. Like, there in no world is that even the case. And also, this is probably the biggest question that I get asked is, does Activision pay swag to play Call of Duty, right? Coming off Black Ops 6, terrible year. A lot of people want to know, yo, do they pay you to continue to play the game? Why would you even play Call of Duty when it's this bad? Let's not talk about it. Activision does not pay me a salary to sit here and play Call of Duty every single day. It's never the case. Now, have I done activations with them to where I was compensated? For sure. I did a thing called the Stories of Verdansk where I basically just told my story about my favorite gameplay on Verdansk, and it was an ad. 100%. Yeah, for sure. We get our loadies and we just start melting through fools like butter. Things like that where it's very like special promotion stuff. Yeah, but there's no sort of like, but that's with anything. You know, Battlefield does that. You know what I mean? Any video game, you know what I'm saying? Like Fortnite just paid creators to like play their event to promote the new event.
The official explanation centered on repetition. Too many back-to-back games in the same series. Too much visual and thematic overlap. Players getting tired of seeing the same name on the box. And while that sounds reasonable, it only scratches the surface. The real issue isn't Black Ops followed by Black Ops. It's the expectation that players should reset their investment every single year. Every annual release wipes progress. Purchases lose value. Communities fracture overnight. Players are asked to start over while still being treated like they're a part of a long-term live service ecosystem. That contradiction is impossible to ignore. You can't promise persistence while designing for disposability. You can't demand loyalty while devaluing time. And you can't expect players to stay emotionally invested when the system tells them nothing carries forward. The yearly $70 release cycle doesn't just create fatigue, it creates detachment. Players stop committing, they stop grinding deeply, they stop believing the experience will last. And once that mindset sets in, no amount of content can reverse it quickly. Changing the release order doesn't fix that, it just rearranges the problem.
Again, I have no intention of playing Black Ops 7 multiplayer Season 1. I can better use my time on literally anything else, taking a thinking about taking a and I'll be the one to say it. Your time is better well spent on a game like Black Ops 7 than MW 2019 Part 4. Now, that is not to say that by some magical reason we need to start sucking BO7's cock. No, two things can be true at once. MW 2019 Part 4 will be poorly received by the fan base that plays it, but it'll likely be kind of successful per Activision standards because of the name, and at the same time Black Ops 7 will be significantly more enjoyable, yet it is a failure in their eyes. So please do not let the fanboys, the gooch slickers, and the throatzillas ever gaslight you into believing some absolute coping nonsense like this from Lunchtime himself. This is what happens when we let a game as good as BO7 do poorly. And the guy underneath him has a beautiful take that I understand is not going to be as popular as the initial take, which is a shame, but as he says, we never let this game do poorly. Activision ignored what players wanted for years. Don't you dare pin it on the people paying money. Activision did this themselves by burning fans over and over and over. Guys, the Scat Master even reiterated something very similar to this.
This model didn't just wear down players, it hollowed out development. Annual deadlines don't reward innovation, they reward predictability. Risk becomes dangerous. New systems get cut. Anything that might slow production gets postponed or scrapped entirely. Over time, ambition turns into optimization. Studios aren't building games anymore, they're assembling them, reusing frameworks, recycling mechanics, rebranding familiar systems with slightly different names. That's how you end up with games that feel polished but empty, smooth but soulless, familiar in the worst way. Call of Duty didn't stagnate because developers lacked talent. It stagnated because the system punished experimentation, and players noticed. Every year started to blur together. Same movement, same pacing, same progression loops. Just enough change to justify marketing, but not enough to feel meaningful. Eventually, players stopped asking what's new. They started asking why they should care. The contrast became impossible to ignore when other franchises took a different approach. Battlefield didn't rush back after failure. It stopped, rebuilt, took time, involved players, let studios breathe, and when it returned, it felt intentional. Not perfect, but deliberate. That time gap mattered. It allowed reflection, iteration, risk. It gave developers space to rethink systems instead of patching around them. Call of Duty never had that luxury. While competitors regrouped, COD kept sprinting forward. Same schedule, same pressure, same expectations. No pause button. And that's when the gap widened, not just in quality, but in perception. One franchise looked like it was learning, the other looked like it was running on momentum alone. Momentum that finally ran out with Black Ops 7. Black Ops 7 didn't just underperform. It exposed that Call of Duty's success was conditional. It relied on a world where players had fewer alternatives, where attention was centralized, where being the biggest was enough. That world doesn't exist anymore. Players have options now, strong ones. And once they step off the treadmill, getting them back, it becomes exponentially harder. That's why Black Ops 7 matters. Not because it failed, but because it showed that the old rules no longer apply. Once the cracks in Call of Duty started showing, one comparison became unavoidable: Battlefield. Just a few years ago, Battlefield was the punchline. Battlefield 2042 launched in a broken state, lost trust almost instantly, and faded from relevance faster than anyone expected. At the time, it felt like proof that Call of Duty had nothing to worry about. But then, something changed. Instead of rushing out another sequel, EA slowed down. They took time. They restructured. They involved the community directly. Developers were given space to fix what was broken instead of slapping a new name on top of it. And Battlefield 6 became the result of that patience. It didn't just launch well. It broke franchise records. It pulled in players who hadn't touched Battlefield in years. And most importantly, it pulled players away from Call of Duty. That last part matters more than anything, because it proved something Activision didn't want to admit. Players weren't loyal to Call of Duty out of love. They were loyal out of habit. And once a credible alternative appeared, that habit broke, which exposed an even deeper issue inside the Call of Duty machine. One of the least discussed problems with Call of Duty has nothing to do with gameplay at all. It's what the developers are allowed to work on. For over a decade, studios like Treyarch and Infinity Ward have been locked into a single IP. Same genre, same mechanics, same deadlines. Year after year after year. There's no creative reset, no chance to step away, no opportunity to experiment in a different space, and that matters. Compare that to studios under EA. DICE worked on Battlefront. Criterion shifted between shooters and racing games. Motive bounced between space combat, remakes, and action titles. Those teams were allowed to stretch creatively. Call of Duty studios don't get that luxury. They're stuck on an assembly line. Different year, same product, same pressure, same expectations. And over time, that kind of environment doesn't refine creativity. It kills it. Developers stop taking risks not because they lack ideas, but because the system punishes deviation. Safe choices survive, bold ideas don't. That's why Call of Duty hasn't meaningfully evolved. It's not because the talent isn't there, it's because the structure doesn't allow growth. And that feeds directly into the next, much bigger problem. For years, publishers treated live service like an infinite money glitch. One game, endless engagement, constant spending, predictable revenue, but nobody stopped to ask what happens when everyone does it. Today, The live service space is overcrowded. Every game demands daily attention. Seasonal grinds overlap. Battle passes stack. Events collide. And players are forced to choose where their time goes. That choice used to be easy. Call of Duty was the center of gravity. Now it's just another option. Players aren't quitting games entirely. They're migrating, sampling, settling where they feel respected. And once they find a new home, they rarely come back. That's why analysts aren't just pointing to quality issues. They're pointing to fragmentation. The audience isn't shrinking, it's splitting. And that changes what success even means. Each new live service hit lowers the ceiling for the next one. Attention gets divided, engagement thins out, revenue becomes unpredictable. And Call of Duty, a franchise built on owning all the attention, isn't designed for that reality. This is the part Activision seems to be struggling with the most. The players leaving Call of Duty aren't waiting for the next fix. They're not sitting on the sidelines hoping the next update saves things. They've moved on. Some found Battlefield. Some found Arc Raiders. Others landed in entirely different genres. Single-player games, co-op experiences, live services that don't reset every year. And once that shift happens, it sticks. Because modern players value time more than anything. Games that respect progress, persistence, and investment win loyalty. Games that wipe the slate clean every year don't. This is why Warzone complicates things further. It pulls attention away from premium releases. The annual titles cannibalize each other. Seasons overlap. Content competes internally. Call of Duty isn't just fighting the market, it's fighting itself. And in that fight, everyone loses. Call of Duty was designed for a different era, an era where players moved together, where attention wasn't fragmented, where yearly releases felt exciting instead of exhausting, where competition couldn't pull millions away overnight. That world is gone. Today's gaming audience is scattered across dozens of ecosystems. Loyalty is earned slowly and lost instantly, and no amount of branding can force players back once they've stepped off the treadmill. That's why Black Ops 7 feels like a breaking point. Not because it's terrible, but because it arrived in a system that no longer works. You can't patch around that. You can't market around it. And you can't rename your way out of it. Black Ops 7 isn't the problem. It's the symptom. A symptom of a franchise trapped in its own success. A system built for dominance in a world that no longer exists. A model that demands more attention every year, while offering less reason to care. Activision can slow releases, rotate names, restructure teams, but none of that matters if the core approach stays the same. Because this isn't about listening to fans too late. It's about realizing that the game has changed. And unless Call of Duty changes with it, Black Ops 7 won't be remembered as a bad launch. It'll be remembered as the moment the franchise finally lost control of its future.